We don't need lunch, right?
No.
But I want to talk about my sister because so many of you asked. Last year, Dawn did her last quilt show with me before she moved far, 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 far away. Well, she did move. She's in Tennessee. She was blessed to find a house within about a month. And it was she was just so many blessings, she said. She loves her new home on the lake. She loves Tennessee. She laughs at me when I say, we just got 6 inches of snow. She goes, it's 60 degrees here. And so she's loving it, having a great time. We're being part of the community and the church, and she's just absolutely loving being in Tennessee. And I got to go there in September and spend 2 weeks with her. It was so fun. And there are several really good quilt shops. And if any of you want to go visit her, you just call and make a reservation. She has a whole guest bedroom, bathroom suite. And she'll take you to all the quilt shops. And to lunch and to gelato. Gelato is the best. Oh, it's wonderful. Anyway, now I'm going to officially tell you, are we ready to start about Dawn? Because she asked me if I would share, and I said, I'm sure they all want to know, because many of you have asked. Are you ready? Andy, are we ready to stream? We're streaming. Oh, you are streaming. Well, let me know that. Edit that last part. Okay. Dawn and her daughter Mary. Mary is an artist, and Mary is the one who drew the Mary Mice designs that we showed last year and all that, and she's an excellent artist. They have started a website, and it's called Mary Mabel Market. Mabel was our grandmother, and so we named it after our grandma. We love our grandma. So she did. I'm not involved, although I kind of wish I was. Only she asked me for advice, and I feel like I helped. So Mary Mabel Market, and I'm going to pass this around, and you can take one of her cards to look up her stuff. Only if you want it. If you don't want it, don't take it. Okay? We don't want to see it in the garbage. So she has a website, marymabelmarket.com. It's all on the card. And she's put up some YouTube videos, and you're going to want to follow her, because the first one she put up, I can't remember what it said. Anyway, she's put up a scrap one, a string one, and a trip around the world, how to do it. And she does it so quick and easy. And she already has thousands of followers. So you're going to want to join and see how she's her own self talking. It's fun. It's quick. It's easy. She gives you tips and tricks. I learn things from my sister.
M-A-R-Y.
M-E-R-R-Y. Mary. And take a card. You'll have all the details. And there's extra cards over there too. I have more cards than you know. And she has on her website, the butterfly pattern is free right now, but it won't be free forever. So if you want to download it, it's a free PDF that you can download the butterfly embroidery pattern. The Mary Mice pattern, those are for sale on her website. All the classes on YouTube I told you about. Her daughter Mary is the artist, and she has a gratitude journal art thing going on right now. It's so fun to watch. She's such a great artist. I'm enthralled watching her art. But I want to tell you this trick. I didn't know this about YouTube before. But YouTube, they don't pay the people. Okay, they're earning, this is Mary's job. She's trying to earn money. They don't pay her if you don't watch the ads. So I always go, ad, skip ad, skip ad. Do you do that? All the time. And I didn't know. Don said, please just let the ads run. You can go, go to the bathroom or go get a snack or go do something while the ads are running. But at least they get credit and paid every time an ad runs. I didn't know that. So now that you know that, let the ads run on Mary's thing, okay? She's working so hard. She works like 12, 14 hours a day doing all this and getting and editing. Dawn's not computer savvy, so she edits everything. Mary edits for Dawn and gets all the videos up for her. And so and this is the latest. Just a couple days ago, she had her, do you remember her pajama quilter DVDs she sold many years ago? She sold many of them all around the world. They're now free on YouTube. So you can look up the Pajama Quilter DVD old things, and she's posted them on YouTube. Share them with your friends, because there's so many people that keep asking Dawn, and Dawn can't sell them anymore. She doesn't have it anymore. So this is free. She's giving it to people. But if you want a PDF download of the workbook for it, it's $10 on her website. So it's half price that way. So she's really been generous to get that information out, because so many people have asked her about long arm quilting. So she's the Pajama Quilter. That's what I wanted to tell you about. We're only 10 minutes. Okay, we are going to start with our first teacher, Sheri Bear, and her two daughters. And I'm going to let her, Kaylee and Aubrey. I should remember that. Kaylee, Aubrey. And they're all very talented. Her daughters have worked in the clothing and textiles and porters and shops, Boise, all these fabric material shops. They probably know more than anybody in the room about fabric and all this stuff. So they're going to help their mom, and we'd like to turn the time over to Sheri.
Thank you. Does anyone else need a flyer? Oh. All right. I'm happy to be here today. Minkee, love it, hate it. I have both feelings about Minkee. I love it and I hate it. And so I hope that you can probably relate to some of those feelings. As I was, talk loud? Okay. As I was getting ready for this, I was trying to find some projects, and forgive me, but I found this. Okay? And it doesn't even have the binding. And as I'm feeling it, I'm like, this is fake fur. Back in the 70s, my dear sweet grandma would make us all fake fur blankets with, yes, double knit polyester. It wore forever. I mean, if I washed it and fixed the binding, it wouldn't look perfectly new, but it would look pretty close. And I would still use it. I love this blanket. I think I've had it since probably the late 70s. And so we love the feel of this, and I think all of you can relate to Minkee. And so Minkee is just wonderful, isn't it? So we're gonna, I just want to go through kind of real quick. We kind of wrote it down so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, because we want to show you the fun stuff that you can do with Minkee. How many of you have sewn on Minkee? How many of you like sewing on Minkee? Well, I promise you that it is the most forgiving fabric and the least forgiving all at the same time. And so, yes. There's kind of a buzzing. I don't know if the microphone. I think they're, yeah, they just turn it on. Yeah.
It's the speaker.
Yes, okay, I'll let them work on it. But if you use a few things, it can help. And so today we want to just kind of give you a few tips and tricks that will help you with working with your Minkee. I was first introduced to Minkee because I was a quilter. I've been quilting for about 27 years. And someone asked me if I would quilt them a quilt with Minkee. And I said no. I'm not even that adventurous, not going to do it. And I feel really bad that I turned her down. But since then, I have learned to use it, and I love it. It's one of my favorite bags to use just because, and even fronts, and I'll show you some of those, because it's just a fun fabric. And it's warm and cuddly, and everybody loves Minkee at our house. My children will beg for a new Minkee blanket, and I look at them and shake my head and say, sorry, it's not worn out yet. Gotta have a few more years on that one. But they've all got piles now of the Minkee. So some of the first things that really are helpful, we can try it. All right, is that any better?
Yeah.
It's very awkward.
If you hook your
Put it over your head.
in your pocket.
Over your head or around your neck?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, yeah, we'll just pass it back. Okay.
Put that.
Okay.
That'll hook to your
Well, we're gonna share it,
Oh,
so
we'll
that's
pass
gonna
it back
be
and forth.
kind of that. How many of you have one of these? How many of you use that? A walking foot. If you have not used your walking foot with minkee, you're missing out because your walking foot really does help. And as you it's got the dual feed, so as your needle goes up and down, this little thing works to help pull all of that minkee through. And so if you don't have one, I really recommend it because it will definitely significantly help. Some of the newer machines have the, what do you call it?
It's a dual feed arm that like drops down. And then you can use like a wide toe foot because you want the most contact with your feed dogs when you're sewing with minkee. And so you'll just engage your dual feed and then use the widest foot. So if you have like a 5mm throat plate, you'll want to use one that will touch the feed dogs on your whole throat plate.
Yeah, and that really does help. You want to talk about the needles?
Yeah. On the back of your handout, there is a needle guide. And this isn't just specifically for minkee, but it's one of the best organized needle guides that I think I've come across. And basically what it does is, I'm sure you all know this, and I'm late to the party because I'm young, but the sizes for the needles are a European size and an American size. So when you read the needles and it's like, oh, you know, I've got an 80-12. You're like, well, what does that even mean? Well, the 80 is the European size and the 12 is the American size. So when you're looking at the pack, I'm like, I've sewn my whole entire life and I just figured this out. So it will make a difference. So when you're looking for it, you want a size 12 needle is what it is, but it's an 80-12 because it's got both the sizes. Then this chart was super helpful because it's got all of the different needles and their purposes. So there's so many different options. And with minkee specifically, you're going to want a stretch needle. They've got stretch needles or a ballpoint needle. And basically the idea is when you use a sharp needle in cotton, it's stabbing one hole and then your thread comes out the hole. But with the minkee, you want the ballpoint to nestle in between the knit of the fabric. So you don't want to poke a whole bunch of holes because then the fluff gets stuck in your hole. So that's never good. So you want to use a ballpoint needle or a stretch needle. So like on your long arm machine, if you're sewing with it, they're not going to have a stretch needle option for all long arm machines. But they will have a ballpoint. So you're not going to find the word stretch most likely, but you will find ballpoint. So those are kind of interchangeable. So that's on your needle. So, and the sizes are a little bit tricky, but you'll want to use an 80-12 if you're using like a lightweight minkee. So we'll explain kind of the difference.
This doesn't have to do with minkee, but if you have, what is the needle that has the largest eye?
That's probably going to be an embroidery needle. They're going to have a long, skinny eye versus like one, because you're either going to put in floss or something that's a thicker option.
So embroidery.
An embroidery, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about needles? I mean, needles are like their whole own thing, but
What size did you say you used for minkee?
I would use an 80-12 usually if you're using like minkee 3, which is this, or stretch. And these are in your handout. I wrote them, they're on this first here. Or at 90-14 if you're doing the really heavy, because that's going to create a bigger hole so that your thread has a bigger hole to go in and it's not going to pull it as much. It's not working. Okay. I'll talk about it now. But yes, the needle is going to make a difference.
It's working.
It is.
It's better because it's nasty.
Okay, we'll just keep yelling. I'm not yelling at you. I'm just talking at you. Okay.
Oh, the other thing is do yourself a favor. You're worth it. When you start a new project, give yourself a new needle. You know, if you're having tension problems, just open a new needle. I went to a seminar once and the guy was talking about needles and he said that a lot of them right out of the package aren't any good. They don't have super high quality control. And so do yourself a favor. If you've tried, even get a different package and try a new needle. Because your needles, I find that if I'm skipping stitches or having problems with my tension, a new needle solves that problem.
The other thing to remember with minkee is it's so tempting to pull it through your machine, right? Because you're sewing on it and it's not going through, so you start pulling. And what that does is it bends your needle. And as soon as you have a bent needle, sometimes it's even just the tiniest bit bent, it starts to really affect how your machine is sewing the minkee, and it gets more and more frustrating. So I put this on your paper, but if you think you've bent your needle at all or it's sounding different, just change your needle. Because if you put it flat on a table and your needle end sticks up or the top of your needle sticks up, you've bent it and you'll want to put a new needle in your machine.
Or if it's popping when you're sewing, if it's popping, you need a new needle.
The next thing on our paper is your thread. So minkee is made of polyester. So ideally you would want to use a high quality polyester thread or some kind of poly cotton blend. That tends to be the strongest, so you're gonna have more luck. You can use a cotton. I've used like Orafil or a really nice cotton thread before and it's done okay. But the polyester is just gonna last as long as your minkee lasts because they last for a long time. Your machine settings.
Oh, okay, and the other thing about thread is you do want to be conscious of your thread color, because it doesn't show, it will, and it depends on how tall your pile is, and some of it will be, embed in, but a lot of it too, you can see it, and you'll notice on some of these, you can see the thread color, but it does disappear, but you can see it. I did try doing glow-in-the-dark thread, and it wouldn't glow in the dark. I was so disappointed, because I wanted the cute little glow-in-the-dark, and it just didn't work. So, and you do want to make sure you're using good thread. I know we all like to save our threads forever, but same with the needle. Sometimes if I'm having a problem with my thread breaking or it not working, if I change out my thread, it will work, because our thread does get brittle. And if you're like me, you got Grandma Harris's thread still sitting there from years ago. I mean, in fact, you'll see the buttons that I got out of her box on my quilt later. So we like to hold on to them.
Button save, thread does not.
Yeah, button saves, thread's not so good. So when you're using you want to adjust your stitch length. As piecers, we like them really tight, so when we cut the cotton, it doesn't come unraveled. With minkee, you're going to want to use a little bit longer stitch. So a 3.5 is a good one for your, like your thicker ones. Sometimes I even go a 4 because it doesn't pull through quite as fast sometimes. But or on your minkee 3s, your thinner weight, a 3 to a 3.5 is good. You want to just make sure, because it does get really intense. So you can lengthen that stitch, and that will help the feeding of it more smooth and work through it. Another trick is if you don't want to sew it down the first time, you can make the longest stitch like a 5. Mine will go a 5, and you can baste it into place, and sometimes that will help. And then you can go back and make your stitch shorter and sew it again. If you're having a hard time lining up padding or making them come out the same. Because minkee's notorious, isn't it? Where you'll put 2 of the exact same pieces together and you come out 2 inches longer on one end than the other.
With minkee as well. Oh yeah.
Do you use spray stabilizer on minkee a lot?
Yeah, I think it depends on the project. If you're piecing it in, you're not going to want to spray your minkee together. But if you're doing like a strip quilt or you're basting it to your batting to quilt, you can use the spray adhesive.
And we'll show you.
Yeah, we have some of those that we can show you.
And we'll tell you.
Yeah. The next thing is your seam allowance. So a 1/4 inch seam allowance is kind of not a thing when you're working with minkee. You want to make it a 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch. A 1/2 is a little easier to gauge on your machine. But because the minkee is thicker, you want to give your seams a little bit more so that you're not trying to get that little tiny 1/4 inch with this thick minkee. So we like to stretch it out to a 1/2 inch. And then the next thing is your presser foot pressure. So if your machine has the option to change how heavy your presser foot is pressing against your feed dogs, it's a great chance to lift it up so that you aren't squishing the fabric back towards you or out the other way. Does that make sense? So if your machine does that, you can look at that in your manual. Some machines don't, and you just kind of have to work with it. But that is always an option if your machine does it.
Usually you use a straight stitch, but a lot of times you can use a zigzag too. you know, a good test is to, if you have something that's really stretchy, have you ever stretched it and had all the seams pop? So if you have a stretch stitch, like if you're piecing a back of two kinds of minkee, a lot of times I'll use a stretch stitch or a zigzag, and that holds them together so that they can stretch a little better. A lot of times you'll sew things together with a straight stitch, and then if you're top stitching, you don't really need to do that zigzag. Bindings, I'll usually use a zigzag for that. And when we're all done doing all this fun stuff, we look at our beautiful, I have a Bernina, I love my Bernina. I look at my beautiful little Bernina and I think, oh, what have I done to you? And so you want to make sure, because lint goes everywhere. And so you want to make sure that you are cleaning out your bobbin casing and that you are, lifting off your throat plate and cleaning out all of that lint. A little, you can use either the brush that the sewing machine stores have, a little bit paintbrush is a good way. And just give that little baby a little oil and it'll keep running. I talk nicely to my machines. We have fights every now and then. Hive cleaners.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. Very
They
good.
fit into little holes, and you got all that minkee fuzz. You gotta get
Bend
out.
it, don't put the sharp wire.
Yes.
Bend it, put a little oil on that and it'll just pick up on.
Oh, perfect. Pipe cleaners. Another thing, what was I just thinking? Oh, a vacuum. You can use a little, if you have a little vacuum, that works really great to suck out all of that lint. And if you're having problems, because if you're doing a lot, check your, what are those? Your tension guides, and make sure that you don't have lint in those, because a lot of times you'll get a lot of lint in there too. But just make sure you're being nice to your
And
machines.
don't use canned air. It's so tempting to spray it, but all the fuzz will go back inside your machine
And moisture.
and moisture, and it just is a disaster. So don't use canned air, but a little vacuum works really well because it pulls it rather than pushing the fuzz. The next thing is cutting minkee. So that's kind of the headache where all this fuzz comes from. And they like to call it, Shannon calls it their minkee dust. And I'm like, I don't like that because it's like a minkee disaster. I think it's annoying. So a couple tricks. I love my little handheld vacuum. You cut everything, and then before I even move it from my cutting mat, I just suck up all the fuzz, because that's more fuzz that's not in my house. My husband hates, with a capital hates, the fuzz. And so I've learned to use my vacuum.
He won't ride in my car because I have too much fuzz.
He hates it. So I have to be vigilant on my fuzz intake. The other thing is, you might want a cutting mat dedicated to me if you're going to be cutting it a lot, because as you cut, you can see it becomes embedded in your cutting mat. And you can kind of use a damp rag to pull out some of it, but it's kind of inevitable. So if you have an older mat that you don't love to use with your cotton, it's a great option to use for your minkee. You'll want to use a brand new sharp blade. That will also save your time and energy, and you're not hacking through it, because minkee is thick. And when you go to sew a straight line, if you've hacked through your fabric, you're going to have a zigzag line to sew, and it's already hard enough. So.
Well, and the bigger blade too is really nice because minkee can get really thick.
I like to use the 60 millimeter when I work with minkee, but if you have a 45 and that's what you tend to use, it'll work as well. It's just not as thick. The other trick that you can use is, once you've cut everything out, you can take your pieces and toss them into the dryer. You can turn it on like just no heat, just kind of a tumble, no heat because you'll melt it because it's polyester. But you can toss it with either a damp rag, or you can just, I tossed a damp rag in a couple of times, but I feel like it does a pretty good job by itself collecting the fuzz. If you just leave it in there for like 20 minutes and let it just kind of toss with the air, it'll pull your fuzz out. So it's not as bad. Pinning. Pinning is going to be your best friend when you're working with minkee. If you've done any minkee project before, you know that if you don't pin, it's going to be a slip and slide. So the best way that we found, or what we found to be most helpful, is the long flower pins. Because if you use the little yellow,
These are the Yeah, the yellow
If
head.
you use the little yellow heads, they get lost in the fuzz. And then we have had projects where we've sewn the whole quilt and then lift it up and poke yourself because you've sewn a pin in and you didn't see it to pull it out.
And the yellow pins are shorter too. So the big flower pins are longer, which makes, and this fancy little button one, it's short too.
So yeah,
So
we
the
have
longer
found
ones are helpful.
the flat flower pins are the best. The other trick is you can call it quilting your pins. I've heard a couple different ways, but you want to go up and down several times. Just poking it in one time, it doesn't quite secure it as well. So you'll want to quilt your pins, or however you refer to that. You can rock your pins. There's a couple different ways to say it, but that is by far one of the most helpful tricks. The other thing is you probably need about twice as many pins as you think you normally need. So I have pinned every 2 inches on something before because it just makes a difference. So put in as many pins as you think and then go in between your pins and put another pin in. I think you'll be happier. And then rule number 5 is pin, pin, pin. If we didn't stress that enough, rule number 5 is pin, pin, pin. Does anybody have any questions before?
I found the little clips.
Yes.
Instead of pins.
We love our little wonder clips, and these big wonder clips are awesome, especially for binding. If you're using anything that's really thick, it's great. And you can pin and clip, which is also a wonderful idea because you can kind of get your big chunks and then go in and pin. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Do you have an extra pin though?
Oh, yeah, Aubrey, do you have an extra one? I have one right here. So we'll show you a couple things. We have more to talk about on our handout, but we're going to show you all the fun stuff now because I'm sure you're tired of listening to us talk.
One question, do you always use batting?
Oh, that is a great question. No, I don't feel like you have to use batting. We'll show you some that are mixed with batting and without. We can point that out if you want, but it's a different fill. You know, if you're using the really, really heavy minkee, batting might be too much, too heavy. But if you're doing something that's maybe pieced and quilted and you want to see your quilting, batting's a great option because it'll help get those stitches on top so that you can see your quilting. So it's kind of preference, but we can point that out for sure. Great question.
We've had the debate for years because she worked at Porter's and she'd come home and say, we're not using batting. And I'm like,
Always use a batting. But mom.
yeah, use the batting. I'm like, no. But I've slowly been convinced it's okay not to use a batting. So some things are non-batting.
Oh, I don't know. Do we want to pass this out?
Well, sure.
Mom, do you want to start these on the side?
There's just lots of different options. If you're only have you had experience with like a minkee 3, there are so many options. So when I say minkee 3, it's
Minkee 3 refers to how
Like 3, the number 3.
3 is
Three
the pile.
is
How
how
thick.
You're saying 3.
Minkee free. We can call it that too.
Minkee 3.
Minkee 3 refers to the 3 millimeters or 3, however tall the pile of the fabric is. So we'll pass around all these different samples, and if you have questions about any of them specifically, we can tell you. But it just gives you a general idea of how it feels and how the different piles look. But this is what you guys, the traditional, I'm going to put this on the back of my quilt or mix it with cotton. This is just that standard soft Minkee 3.
They have it with glitter. Then they have the minkee. This is printed and it's thicker. This is a Shannon. There's several different companies out there. QZ Fabric, Easy Fabric. Okay. Anyway,
Wrinkle
so
her in.
this is what we used to get a lot of. And it would be, it's a little bit thicker and it's been done. Now they're doing digital. And so the digital is a lot thinner and it's not quite as thick. But and you can look at them side to side and you can kind of see. And digital, there's so many fun things you can do with digital. There is the company, Spoonflower. I always forget the name of the company.
Spoonflower.
Yes.
So Spoonflower has the option to print on minkee, but their minkee is going to be a digital smaller pile. So when you order a print from them, they'll send it with this white border, and you can get however much yardage you want. They've got like a design name, but we can pass this around as well. It's a fun option if you have something specific that you want printed on minkee. There's kind of endless options. You can get anything on minkee.
You can go on Spoonflower, design your own minkee, and they will print it for you. So that's what the Spoonflower is, but it is a thinner.
I can go, the other samples are in the flux mini.
Oh, okay. So we're going to show you the things that we've made with the minkee 3. So the thinner, the smaller stuff. And you can do lots of fun stuff. So
These are just like a little tiny, so minkee mostly comes in 60 wide, which is really convenient when you're making baby gifts or blankets, because you have more than just a 42 or 45 width to work with. So this is a fun little, they call them loveys and taggies, but they're just little options for babies. But it's kind of a fun way to use minkee. If you've never made a project with minkee, this might be a great one to start with.
my granddaughter, I went over there the other day and she had hers, she's 3 now. And I'm like, oh, we need to get rid of that. She's grown out of it. And her mother says, oh no, that's her travel blanket. She takes it in the car because it's small and lightweight. So we've had nieces.
Travel blankets.
And they hold on to them forever and ever. Here's another one that is, I think, just adorable. The size.
It's a 30 by 36. So this is just a yard of fabric that you've cut in half widthwise, and you can get 2 blankets out of 1 yard of print and 1 yard of
the back. And the other thing, when you're laying these out, you want to be aware of the nap. And if you feel the minkee, you can tell it has a nap. It's smooth one way or rough. And so if you, you can see it changes. So you want to make sure that you lay them out smooth and smooth. The other thing you want to make sure that you're doing is the stretch. If you've got a piece, it stretches better one way than another where it's not as stretchy. You want to make sure you're sewing the stretchy parts at the top, the non-stretchy on the sides, but sew them the same, because if you do them where you have a stretch here and a stretch here, sometimes it gets out of control. They'll stay better if you use the stretches together. We have lots of little taggies. We have some with designs, and you just put the ribbons in. Then there's these little ones. Are you going to pass it around?
Yeah, these are fun. And these little ones, you can add elastic and things. These will like clip to their little binky so that they can have it with them or clip on their car seats.
What is that?
They're just little things that you can use for babies, like flip it on their car seat so they can feel it, or a lot of the little tags, they'll kind of tease on them. It's basically a germ magnet you can wash every day. But it's fun and soft and sweet. So I'll pass these around so you guys can.
Another thing that's fun to make are little like teething rings where you can just make little bunny ears and tie them. And you don't even have to use just minkee. This one has a cotton.
That one's like a chenille. Shannon had a chenille fabric, but there's lots of fun little projects you can do with the minkee.
You can make like fun bags.
Yeah, that one's like a little drawstring bag. This is when you get really adventurous.
Yeah.
Casings.
And it has a fun minkee inside. Yeah. And then it can be a backpack for your kids. Or you can put your minkee blanket in it to go on your travel.
That's right. Travel pillows. Yeah, boys.
Pillowcases are great. You can make, you know, your lovely pillowcases. The only problem that I know that we've had with these, one day I made all of my kids for Christmas lovely pillowcases. And they came out, as you can see, they have beautiful hair. And I think Aubrey came out and her hair was just and she says to me, Mom, I love the pillowcase, but I just get so much static in my hair. The one thing, I just don't really like the pillowcase that comes out like this for little kids. And so for Christmas, I made all of my grandbabies matching a pillowcase. And I put a nice little zipper in the end so that they don't fall off or get lost, because I have more pillows without cases on them than I should in my house. So I liked the pillowcases with the zipper. And you can put zippers in them. And they are not hard to do. So this is always a fun thing to do with the zipper. Another fun thing you can do is make pillows for your couches, you know, and they're super simple. You can either do them with the fold in the back, or this one isn't minky, but you do it the same way, is you just put the zipper in the bottom.
It's an invisible zipper that you send. And we've done that with the minkee,
Yes.
and it's fun to have your pillow
Yes.
that sits on, so then nobody's taking off your cover.
Yeah, so those are always nice. All right. So,
I have a question.
yes.
When putting in a zipper, how do you deal with the fuzz with putting it in the zipper?
So a lot of the time when you cut it, you can kind of brush your fuzz one way, especially if it's really thick. So you'll want to just carefully brush away your fuzz and kind of lay your zipper. I always like to pin, because sometimes with your zipper, you know, you'll have the 3 layers or you'll have your 2 layers. I always sew on top of my zipper, so I'm not sewing on the fuzzy side. And then I feel like the M3, the shortest minky pile, it really isn't too bad. It looks a lot cooler than it is, because you're like, wow, they put a zipper in the minky. But it really sews in pretty similar to putting in a normal zipper.
I also used a double-sided tape where I put it on the zipper and then the minky and put it in place, and then that holds it in place too. So you don't have to super pin.
You can
Yeah.
paste it in. Yeah. This is a mixture of
Flux. You want to tell what Lux is? Oh, yeah. So we've told you about the Minky 3. So it's the thinner pile. Then we go into what is the Luxes.
So with the Luxes, they have all different kinds of textures. And this is where it gets really fun, because you can make
Yes.
unique blankets. But a lot of the time, they're a little bit trickier to work with. They've got glitter in it, which is fun. They've got really thick furs that you can kind of use different kind of wildlife type looks. But really, the options are endless.
And you notice some of them are thicker and some of them are thinner. And the thinner ones by far are easier to work with.
This one, they have a shag, which is going to probably be your thickest. But they start to get pretty thick, which are great for backs. Sometimes it's a little harder to piece with.
Yes.
Doesn't it? I know, like a bath rug that you're gonna. But yeah, we'll pass these around. You can feel there are so many different kinds, but we wanted you to at least get a feel for what options they have.
This one is just yummy.
I think
and
that one's my
scrumptious.
favorite.
It's called Vienna, and it is lovely. It is lovely. It's worth every penny, honestly.
It is so pretty.
Because it will wash so lovely. In fact, I got up this morning and my son had come home and I look in my dryer and there's his minky blanket. He had washed it to get it fluffy and soft again.
So you can mix the Lux with the Minky 3, and I think that's what a lot of people are starting to do, because there's more Luxes now. But we'll show you a couple options. So this is the same concept as the little zebra quilt that we showed you, but it's got the fuzz on the back. So it's got thick Lux and then the M3.
It's soft.
And my nieces all have these, and they love them. They're free.
The same one.
It's 30 by 36, so it's a yard of fabric, and then you cut it in half lengthwise, and you get 2 blankets, two from each print and 2 from your Lux.
So you can piece with Minky, and these are 12-inch blocks. And you'll notice we have some of the Minky 3 mixed in with the Luxus.
And this does not have a back.
No, it does not have a back.
So this is sewn all the way through using the spray adhesive. So you'll put one row on.
So you piece you'll piece your row of blocks together, and then you spray it down with the 505 spray. So like this. Best friend in the world. So you spray it down. And the good thing about this is once you've sprayed it down, you get your quilt made. When you're all done, throw it in the dryer with no heat, and it kind of, it freshens it. It kind of takes out the sticky. So,
And that'll wash out. The 505 washes out when you wash it.
right.
Now you sewed the squares and then you did the,
We did it in rows. So we sewed the row and a row and a row.
okay,
And then you sew them, you kind of layer them.
okay.
One row to the next row. And you can see it's been layered. And so that is, yeah,
Oh, and it's so soft.
it is soft.
I love that.
What size are those squares?
12 inches. Yep. And then for the super adventurous person, you can do them 6 inches.
But that same concept of mixing some of the M3s, the Mickey 3s, with some of the
Prints.
Lux. That's a lot of time. This is great for scraps because you can put anything in a 6-inch square.
If you have a lot of little scraps, that's a good way to use them up.
And this is probably one of the highest piles. So it can be sewn in. You just are gonna go slow and pin all your blocks in. But it's so fun. It's like 3D, isn't it? It like pops out. And this is one of the frosters, so it's kind of got a strips. Are those strips or?
Nope, this is just one solid back. And you just do you sew the one strip, and then you put the next strip on and you fold it down. Does that make sense?
Like a sew as you go type
Yeah.
of thing. Sew as you go. Yes.
And none of these have battings in them.
This is a strip. This is probably a more traditional way that you've seen minkee be done, is the strips. And it's a fun way to start. Yeah, question?
Looks like you're binding with the minkee. Is that real hard?
It presents its own challenges, but it's not that hard one.
You can do it.
It's hard.
You just a couple simple rules. You don't want to do a double fold. Not like our cottons. You want to do a single fold. This one has a little bit thicker. And I'll be honest, the thicker the binding, the more rolling you'll get. You'll notice on some of the quilted ones, I just do the thinner binding and I don't find the roll.
Do you mean narrow or wide?
Narrow, yeah.
So yeah, this is a 3-inch binding. So it's really thick. And some
Yeah.
people like that because they feel like they have more fabric to pull over and it's a little bit easier. I actually think the thinner binding is easier because you're trying to wrestle less minkee.
What about bringing the back to the front,
You could totally do that.
wrap and then miter the corners?
You definitely could. Minkee these are fun because they're just little. These are 8-inch blocks. So there was 12, 6, and then these are 8-inch blocks.
How many of you remember Scooby-Doo?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can, and this one's that same, it's no batting, it's a quilt as you go.
And this one, it does not have a binding. So if you don't like binding, you can do the strips without the binding. This one is done where you piece the whole top and do the envelope. And then you sew all the outside and then turn it and then you just do a stitch around the top. Yeah,
Yeah, so this one, it's definitely an option if you don't want to try the
the
binding.
binding.
No, you just sew.
So that one is sewed to the back.
No,
all
that
right.
one's not sewed to the back. And some of them, none of these, like I said, have the batting in. And this one is just like a cuddler where the back is brought to the front and where it's kind of that Porter's, I think Porter's had a flyer on it.
It's like the self-binding
Yes.
receiving blanket. So you're gonna cut like a square or a triangle out of your corners, and then you fold them together and sew it. I'm sure you've all seen that done with like a flannel. But this is fun with the minkee because then you can put any kind of panel or piece in the center.
That's right, George. One.
And then we have half the pin one.
And you don't
One
know
of
that.
those.
I need to talk to Tim.
But this is a lovely little baby mat that you can just lay down. It's got the minkee tree on the back if you want. It does have batting in the middle, so it's padded. So if you want to like use it as a diaper changing pad on the floor or just to lay your baby on.
But
So
you gotta get your mohawk.
yeah,
That's the best
mohawk.
part. It's just a piece of faux fur. So it's from the craft section, and then you just glue it and you create a little. Shannon Fabric actually had a kit for this.
Yeah.
So they may have some on their website
Yes.
if you want to look.
Yeah, that's very good.
Cute.
And you can, like I said, these are what we call the double plushes, meaning the thicker plushes on both sides. And so these are our favorite at our house. You know, we always pet ourselves.
Do you sell those?
I do
just
not.
noticed the tag on
but-
the side.
These
Yes.
tags are from the Minkee Supply Company down
Yes.
in Idaho Falls.
Tiff and Scott Duff, which is Nancy Duff's children. They own the Minkee Supply Company down in Idaho Falls, and they sell them there.
It is on 17th. Yeah, it's right at the end of where Channing ends, and there's like
How
a
much
strip
are they?
mall with the dollar
You know,
store.
ballpark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends upon the size. Yeah.
There's little ones that are
Oh,
30
yes.
by 36.
What do the little ones run?
Oh,
Just
I don't even know. That's not my department. I just saw. So, they put how much are they?
They
I'll look
range.
it up for you.
Yes.
I'll look it up. They have a website.
This is two pieces that have been sewn into a quilt. So this is a big. It's that exact same concept as that little one,
Yeah,
just big.
So it's two pieces sewn together and then turned.
and turned inside out.
Do you sew it like an X on it or anything so it doesn't, you know?
No, we just put this little one around here. You could put an X in it if you wanted.
If it
because-
shifted on you.
Yeah, pass that one around. Because it is really floppy in the middle. And that was my problem. They're not stable in the middle, but you know what? When you're sitting there cold and you put that over you, it doesn't matter. You just love it. It's just the best thing, right?
I just
A little snuggle button.
This one's kind of the same concept. It's got kind of a lower pile, but a thicker one on the back.
But it's that same picture frame. I don't know if you can see. It's kind of hard because they blend in. But we'll pass the little one around and you can see the concept there.
For Christmas, I gave my son's girlfriend a blanket. And it just kills me. Every time she walks in my front door, she's toting her blanket so she can use it at my house.
We call her Linus from the.
Looks like the little ones are about $27.
These are fun. These are scarves.
They have a website that you can go to and
You
see
run
what
into
they
the
have.
same static sometimes, but they're really soft and really warm. You can do like an infinity scarf, or this is just a straight scarf that you can tie around. But that's another option for like scraps if you've got a little bit left over, because Minkee's expensive, so you got to use every last bit.
It is. But worth every penny. And it does last. Like I said, I was going through my box and I'm pulling out these blankets and they're so soft. And if you have a Minkee that's lost its fuzz, put it in the washer. Don't put detergent on it. Wash it on cold and put vinegar in it. And then when you pull it out, you can air fluff it in your dryer. And a lot of times that will revive it. Okay. Let's shut this down. And then- You can do fun pillows for your grandbabies and give them a book, which is always fun. I made some for my grandbabies and they use them and use them until they're just flat. But they're always fun. They're reading pillows.
This one is a panel. So they print Minkee in really cool panels as well. And you can kind of do the same concept where you're sewing different panels around. But it's a great way to use some of those fun thick.
This is
Yeah.
a big shad.
And if you want
And
any
it's
questions
heavy.
specific quilts afterwards, we can totally explain it.
They're not weighted blankets, but they are weighted. And sometimes they bring their own comfort. So quilting with Minkee. How many of you have quilting machines or quilted with Minkee? Do you like it? Love it. I love it too. It is one of my favorite fabrics to use. And, oh, so you can do fun things like, the Minkee 3 tends to show the design much better. You'll grab the ones that-
Could you repeat that? Which one?
The Minkee 3, the lightweight.
Kind of still.
See, you can see the design in pretty much.
Versus the front, it's still cute, but it's you can't see the print as well.
So I always like to, if I'm gonna do something,
It has batting in it, yes.
yes, all of my quilteds have that in it. I figure if you're gonna go to the word you want, the design. And so,
You can put like a fourth of a cup, depending on how big your quilt is.
some of the ones that are like embossed, this one's kind of got raised. You can still see the design. But if you're gonna use like an embossed, you might have competition, the quilting with that. This one I don't think is too bad.
Yeah, but it's just fun to say, if you're gonna put a ton of work, like have it custom quilted, and you really wanna see the quilting, maybe the embossed isn't the one to put on that quilt, because you won't see it as much. And the front, you gotta show the
Yeah,
front, because
gotta show
that's
the
how
front,
it
it's
shows,
fun.
right?
Oh, look at the back.
Yes, this is cotton on the front. Yes.
I don't know where the center is, but
Right here.
If you're going to do something with the design, you can see this one, you don't really see the quilting on it, which is fine if that's your design. So you can't really see it, but with the cotton, you do see it on the front.
this one is well loved too. So the Minkee has been well loved.
Oh,
But we wanted to show you all that you can see all your custom quilting in your
This-
fun.
this is Aubrey's quilt, and
This is
she
the chicken.
she moved out and left it at home, and we used it. And I finally said to her one day, "You need to take that home." And today she says to me, "You're going to show my quilt, Mom? I haven't got the eyes on the chicken yet." So we left her chicken quilt without the eyes.
I was like 14. That keeps on giving. Oh, it's upside down here. It doesn't matter. But it is, the Minkee on the back is so fun of a cotton. And it's nice because if it's wider than 45, your quilt can fit without a seam, which is really helpful.
So your back can be a little more economical. You may think it's a little bit more, but you're not buying as much cotton.
Oh.
So this is a great example of super custom quilted. And you'll see, you can almost tell exactly what they are.
Who they are.
So don't be afraid to put it on the back of your quilts because it just
Yes.
makes it so fun.
And then when you cuddle up with it, you have the Minkee on you and the pretty on the front. Any questions about quilting with Minkee?
How'd you do the binding?
The binding, all right. Like I said, which ones did we?
That one right there.
Yeah,
What
these-
is that binding?
this is a 3-inch binding, so it is very thick. As opposed to the one behind you.
Is it the?
When you
3
start with
inches
a
wide?
3-inch wide. This one is a 2-inch wide,
So you
so the width.
you don't double fold them.
No, you do a single fold. So you will just have one piece of fabric. I usually sew it to the back, and you will stitch it down, and then you fold the one fold over, and you will tuck it in and then stitch it down.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
So you do this.
There's a video, I put the link in your handout. Shannon Fabric has a video specifically for binding with Minkee. They have one for the Minkee 3, which is the softer lower pile, or the Luxe. If it's your first time, I would probably recommend the softer minkee 3. The Luxe gets tricky because you've got the fuzz of the fabric and like the meat where it's all attached to. And if you don't sew on the meat underneath, then your fuzz will pull right out of your
And it
stitches.
won't, you'll have a hole.
So you'll want to kind of watch for that too, especially in your seams. If you've got a really thick pile and you just sew on the fur, it's going to pull right apart. So kind of watch for it, and you'll see it's the back of your minkee that's the actual fabric. It's not. Usually it has the soft fur side, and then the back side, we can pass some more of those samples around. The back is usually like a polyester woven type feel. So they're one-sided.
If you use a cotton on the top and a minkee on the bottom, do you have any issues with shrinkage?
I haven't,
Okay.
not too
Just
bad.
because the minkee gives, or?
I mean, wash or not wash is a debate, I think,
Yeah.
but for the most part, I feel like as long as you're not stretching it super
Right.
hard, if you stretch it on your long arm and then you let it go,
It'll
it'll
retract.
shrink.
Cause I've done that before where I overstretch it on the sides and then it, comes in. So you just wanna make sure you're not overstretching it as you're quilting it.
Do you have issues like when you're putting it on your long arm and you're rolling it? I've had it where it's like, I get this big bow and it's like something's weird and it's like kind of gets straight.
Usually I like, and maybe Susan, you can attest to this or whoever, I like to put my cut edge on the leaders because it seems to help. Because the stretch is less going down, so it's pulling less. And it kind of helps absorb some of that stretch, doesn't it? Yeah, I've done it both ways.
The other way sometimes. If
Yeah.
you keep them and you just can't tighten the machine up as much.
Right.
You have to leave more of a.
You have to kind of a little less. Do you have any?
If I have a width, 16 inch wide, I don't, you always say cut off the salvage with cotton. Don't cut it off with minkee because that, you can tell it's not gonna stretch as much as the cut edge. So put the salvages down the side as Sheri did in the cut edge.
Yeah.
Can you share that with us?
A little louder.
Oh,
She was saying that your stretch, so when you put it onto your bars of your long arm, you want your stretch, so the fabric that's been cut, not your selvage, to be pinned to your bar. You want that parallel with your bar.
on the bar.
Yes, and then your selvage edge will run down the sides of your machine.
And don't trim.
yes,
And don't trim your selvage off.
we did.
Yeah, because you'll want the stability that the selvage will have on your machine.
Yes, minkee is a lovely fabric. Make friends with it.
Don't be afraid.
Yes.
Do you have to give more room or you know how you leave little, 4 inches around? Do you have to leave any more? Or have you noticed any difference?
I just do it the same as I do my cottons. Sometimes, yeah, a little bit stretchier. Okay.
Oh, yeah, so the Minkee Supply Company has given us samples to give you guys so that you can make your own travel pillow. So this is made from the Luxe, but yours will be the Minkee 3. There's tons of different prints in here. These are kind of like an ombre floral when you open them up. So the different colors are kind of different florals. There's some fun stripes in here, but the instructions are wrapped around it. And then they've offered a coupon so that you can go in and visit their shop. I know currently they don't have tons of fabric in, they're waiting for shipments, but.
And this fabric is also fabric that is in cotton, but it's been printed onto minkee.
So it's a digital print.
Yes. So make sure you come and get one, and you can all have some fabric.
You can all have your own travel pillow.
Yes. And you can fight over. All right, any more questions? Yes.
Batting.
Yes.
What kind do you use?
Batting, I usually, I like using a poly batting in it. You can use cotton. I like the poly because if I'm doing like, the monkey quilt, it's all poly. The front's poly, the back's poly. I like doing that in the middle. You can use cotton. You do have to be careful to use, I found different batting some of it will make it a stiffer minky, and some of it will make it a more flowing minky. And so you do want to just, that's one thing I've started to notice. But I usually use a lightweight because it is, you know, the minky is heavy. Yeah, I like Quilter's Dream, Warm and Natural, the So Bright. So Bright.
So who owns the shop?
Tips.
It's my son and
Well,
daughter-in-law.
thank you for the sample.
Yes, yes. I'll thank you when you go in. So,
Yes, you should go in and check it out. It's just fun to go in and rub your hands on everything that's in there.
we're black, so you can come out looking like.
You get all the
We're black.
I did. Oh. Oh,
Okay, so we put it on the table so you can get it easier. There should be one for everyone. But before we depart for lunch, we'd like Heidi to come up here.
Oh, yay, Heidi.
Where's Heidi? Heidi. Heidi.
Heidi.
Heidi retired last year, and Helene has taken over as the library director. And so you didn't know that. But many of you signed blocks for her quilt. This is her quilt we're giving to her. This is your quilt. So it only took a year to give it to her, but we wanted you all to see it. So, and then you tell them about it.
Okay, so we had a few empty spots and we're like, who do we get to fill them? So I came up with the idea, maybe I should get a hold of some of the authors that she likes. And so a lot of them sent me their signatures so I could copy them on. Some of them sent a book. One sent, I'm not gonna get them all out, one sent a bookmark for a new book, one sent a set of magnets for a series of books that she has. And then the one is from her daughter, just sent a letter, so.
Oh.
Nice.
These are all for her. Yes. A very good one.
Okay?
Nice.
So, all right, have a happy lunch.
And a block. Like the mascara in his
Turn it off.